Hello all and welcome to RiskScout's webinar, Fraud Red Flags, Spotting Scams and Stopping Crime at Your Institution. We are so excited to have you all joining us here today. Now, before we dive into today's webinar content, let's run through some quick housekeeping items. RiskScout will be sharing all of today's webinar resources, including these slides, all of the handouts, and a recording of today's session in a follow-up email tomorrow morning, so be sure to keep an eye on your inbox. We also want this session to be as valuable for you as possible, so we encourage you to ask any questions that you may have throughout today's session in the questions section of the webinar panel on the side of your screen. We'll also be running a few polls today throughout the webinar to better understand you all, our audience, so your participation is greatly appreciated. Now, in case it is your first time joining us, RiskScout is a team of former regulators, BSA professionals, and fintech developers helping financial institutions grow and being more efficient and profitable. Through a full BSA AML suite and specialized market tools, RiskScout solutions increase revenue and decrease your compliance burden by unlocking new deposit streams and automating compliance workflows. We are funded and influenced by over 200 financial institutions through networks like Castle Creek, the Bankers Helping Bankers Fund, and Alloy Labs. If you are interested in learning more about how we help community banks and credit unions every day, be sure to visit riskscout.com and get in touch. Next month, RiskScout will be hosting a webinar with our partner Q6 Cyber, covering all things check fraud. In this presentation, we'll take attendees deep into the cyber criminal underworld, where checks are stolen, altered, and sold, so you can understand how these counterfeit instruments make their way into the financial system through money mules. This will be a valuable session for any institutions facing check fraud, so be sure to save your seat today. This webinar is made possible by the strong partnership between RiskScout and DCI, two companies that are dedicated to improving technology to empower banks and credit unions to better support their communities. Through our collaboration, customers of RiskScout and DCI enjoy seamless data integrations, collaborative problem solving between our expert teams, and a commitment to supporting your growth and success in whatever shape that may take. We are proud to stand together on this webinar and beyond to provide a better banking and compliance experience for community bankers across the nation. Today's webinar will be led by Cynthia Wallace, the Fraud Investigations Manager at Data Center Inc. Cynthia brings over 30 years in the payments industry in all product types, including check, call centers, bank sponsorship, fintech, prepaid and gift cards, crypto, and digital payments, and she describes herself as a recovering Chief Compliance Officer of FinTech. Cynthia's extensive experience in the industry provides her with a diverse skill set that allows her to educate and lead an exceptional fraud and compliance team over at DCI. We are so excited to have her joining us here today. Now, without further ado, we can go ahead and dive into today's excellent content. Cynthia, I'll pass it over to you. Take it away.
Thank you so much, Ethan, for that warm welcome and introduction. And I want to extend DCI and myself to all of our attendees here today. I'm so excited that you're here, and I'm so passionate about the fraud topics that we're going to discuss today. I really have had several conversations with Ethan. I think that this really should be talked about more. Today, we're going to be covering all of these items in our little time together. So I'm going to talk kind of fast. There's a lot more information out there that I could just spend a day with you, but I don't have a day to spend with you. So we're going to move along pretty quickly. We will cover all of these. Hopefully you'll walk away with a whole tool set of how to handle potential scams and how to feel more confident when dealing with your customers from a banking and credit union perspective. I think this is also going to hit home with your AML and BSA folks out there. You're near and dear to my heart. So with that, let's just dive right in.
Excellent. Thank you for that overview. Now, before we do dive in too deep, We do have our first poll question. So all of our audience, y'all should see this popping up on your screen now. This is our first poll that asks, what types of fraud are you experiencing at your institution today? Good news is you can select as many or as few of these responses as possible. We just kind of want to get a feel for who all we have on the call today, what kind of activity you're seeing, scams. You can select anything from romance scams, check fraud, trafficking, money mule, or other. Maybe there are things that we're not even going to cover today that you're really dealing with. So we'll give you just a couple more seconds to get these responses in. Excellent. We got a bunch of our audience is eager, very quick on the draw here. So I'll go ahead and close this out and we will share these results around and we can talk about them a little bit. So Cynthia, I know not a big surprise to me, but overwhelmingly 92% of our audience today says check fraud. They're experiencing check fraud. What I think is maybe a little bit more surprising is 82% of our audience says that they are experiencing romance scams, AKA pig butchering, whatever you might call it. Definitely a big one. Money mule activity, just under half. Other 30%, which of course encompasses a whole lot. Only 4% of our audience reports that trafficking related activity at their institution. Cynthia, let me ask you, I know you work with institutions every single day. Does this surprise you at all?
You know what does surprise me about these results, and I'm right there with you with check fraud, especially with all the mailbox keys being stolen and broken into. I'm right there with you. Romance scams, I think, have hit the headlines time and time again because it's really, really impacting the vulnerable. But this trafficking related activity, I think, is low. And I think it's low because I feel like it's underreported and under-recognized. So let's talk about that a little later and see if perhaps there are some telltale signs we can share with you to maybe demonstrate how someone might be being trafficked and you might miss that subtle cue. But for now, I think we'll move on. I am in the same boat with you with those romance scams. So let's talk about several different kinds of scams. When we'll start with elder abuse, because this is what I'm seeing more in our banks. Is this elder abuse, and it is absolutely heartbreaking when the person who is elderly comes in and wants to buy money orders. This is not their typical MO. This is not how they do their banking, right? These folks are typically still writing checks to pay their bills. So when they come in asking for money orders, or they come in asking for gift cards, or asking about cryptocurrency, huge red flag, right? Basically, these folks are looking to fleece the elders out of their money, and they will use all kinds of tactics that are just shameful. It's like fake charities, or they will impersonate being a sheriff of a local community. The romance scams, right, obviously, and then just general internet-based fraud. So in the fake charity scams, you have people who are saying they're from the United Way or Goodwill, or they're doing something for the policeman's ball. Now, all of that could be totally legitimate, but they are just ripe fruit for scams. And if you want to know more on how those happen, sorry, I had put just a ton of URLs in here. So just bear in mind, if there's a URL, there's a pretty good story that I just didn't have time to cover that would give you a good example of each one of these types of scams. If we can go back to the previous slide, we will talk a little bit about impersonation scams. Now, this is getting more popular, and I'm hearing about it more often, where somebody is picking up the phone, and it's typically AI induced, and it's the son calling mama or the grandkid calling the grandparent. I've been in an accident. I've been arrested. I am in the hospital and they won't let me go until I pay the bill, right? That's all impersonation scams. It's interesting and can sometimes be really hard to detect. I believe one of the stories that I personally knew about was a family member who was just about ready to get out the wallet, right? Do whatever it took to get their grandkid safe and secure. But at the end of that call, the impersonator responded with "thanks, Pops." And the grandpa had never been called Pops before, right? It can be just the most inconsequential seeming thing that can lead you in down this path, right? So of course he called the grandkid's fine. It was a total scam, but it almost had him hook, line, and sinker. If 80% of our audience is saying romance scams are an issue, I know you know this. We'll talk about it more in a specific story in a little bit. And then this internet-based fraud, right? This could be sweepstakes. It could be tax related, very popular this time of year. Investment scams, right? Fake websites, online communications, trying to get you to put your money into the latest fad. So all of these things just are bucketed into the types of approaches a fraudster will take, but it's all fraud at the end of the day, and that's what you need to take home with you. We can proceed. These are some of those stories I told you about, so feel free to download all of these handouts and use them to any degree that they can help you in your day-to-day fraud fighting arsenals. So we can just move on from this. Romance scams, right? We know them as romance baiting, pig butchering. It's not specific to an age group. I think you already know what it is, right? Based on your poll question response, but did you know, right? And these are things that we can teach our constituents, whether they be our staff to protect themselves and their loved ones and their elders, or protect our customers. You can do reverse image scans now, right? You can use what's available for free in the internet and turn these scams, right, into something that is now public. It is now exposed for what it is. So you can upload these reverse images in a search tool like 10i to tell if it's a real or fake photo, right? And it will tell you, right? If that scammer is using maybe a stock photo, then this reverse image lookup will tell you where else that image has been used. You might find it in a Victoria's Secret commercial or in a Guess commercial, right? And that tells you right off the bat that that person isn't who they are portraying themselves to be in terms of what they look like, right? So that's tip number one on the romance scams. Let's move on from that now, and let's talk about what's happening in the legal world, in changes to laws that are directly impacting romance scams. I hadn't heard of this term. I thought I'd share it with you. It's called love bombing, and it's constant bombardment of compliments in terms of endearment. I think in the old days we called this sucking up, but it's in a more personal manner, right? Trying to get somebody to really endear themselves to you and to your assets, right? But the quickest way to anyone's heart, obviously, is not through the belly. Apparently, it's through the brain, right? So in one story, this lady, her name is Beth Highland, she drove 9 hours to get to the Senate Commerce Committee to share her story. She had been divorced for 4 years. She was trying the dating game. Her friends talked her into it, and lo and behold, she met somebody named Richard, right? He claimed to be a French project manager for a construction company, and he started texting and talking with her on the phone. This is not unusual to have the talk on the phone either. But he wasn't who he said he was, right? Oh, big shock there. 1 month into their relationship, Richard, whoever his name was, whoever he really was, this gal, Beth, was so in love with him, she didn't think twice when he asked for financial help. He said he was going to Qatar, and he said, before I leave, I want to propose to you. And when I come back from Qatar, we're going to share all of our riches, and we're going to have a new house and a new life together. And I mean, she fell for it, hook, line, and sinker. She sent him some money, right? Because he said his account was locked and he needed access to funds before he could make that trip, and he needed $50,000 and Bitcoin, right? That's the other thing. So it's time sensitive. There's a threat there. You know, I can't go and get our big money until you give me a little bit of money, but I need it in this other form, which is the Bitcoin. She actually sent out loans. She took out loans and sent him $26,000. Then he asked for another $50,000. She finally went to her financial advisor, and the advisor said, I hate to tell you, Beth, you've been scammed, right? You need to just cut off all ties. She didn't want to believe it, but after a week, she did cut off all ties. She lost the $26,000. But the really sad point of this story is that scammer guilted her so badly in that week after she learned what she was falling victim to, that he even he threatened to commit suicide, right? So now his life is on her head if she doesn't come through with her promises. These are just horrific ways to treat our fellow human beings. But Richard was a Nigerian scammer, and he was part of the Yahoo Boys. And if you aren't familiar with them, they are a deplorable group. You can look them up in Google. They have actually cost lives, right? People have committed suicide more than once because of this particular gang, and they're very good at what they do. And all you have to be is a little lonely, a little vulnerable, let your guard down, and they've got, you know, their hooks into you. So I share this story so that you can go and look at it. The point of this being that there is legislature to get these social media companies back in line and to start shutting down these social media and fake sites that we were talking about, but also these chat bots and folks that are using translators to maybe put their loving sentiments into English, right? Because it's not their first language. So that's enough of that story, but a good taste of what we're talking about and what the reactionary is. Meta, who owns Facebook, announced in 2024 that it's dedicating staff to identify where scammers operate and share information with international law enforcement, and that they have taken down more than 2 million accounts in 2024. All of that's great. What they're going to do is they're going to pull from Facebook, Instagram. They're going to monitor the chat apps, in this case, Facebook Messenger and WhatsApp, right? Then they're going to flag those scam messages when people message over Messenger or DMs that at a WhatsApp app group. They are saying they took down a ring, but here's the thing, they're not doing it fast enough. So while there's something being done, we really need for the buyer to have the buyer beware stance. And so I wanted to make you aware that there is some very beginnings of legal action going on. But I will tell you too that the folks that have these chat availabilities, these apps, they aren't in the US. And so I put a little tag down here at the bottom. Pavel Durov was arrested in 2024. He absolutely refused to do anything about known and proven scams that were occurring on his platform. So a really interesting read. And it's great to see that law enforcement and social media is starting to take action, but it's very slow moving and it's going to require additional time. In that meantime, these folks are still falling for these scams. So be aware that this isn't going away anytime soon, and we need more tools to educate our customers and our community in general. And we can move on to talk about the next area. This would be our secondary session where we will go into trafficking.
That's right. Now, before we do get too deep into trafficking, we do have our second poll question, which should be popping up on your screen right now. That question is asking, how confident are you in recognizing the red flags that are tied to human trafficking and financial exploitation? You could select any of these options, everywhere from being very confident in identifying these, maybe you're not very confident, or maybe you're just not sure. Like we saw earlier in our first poll, only about 4% believe that they're experiencing this at your institution. So maybe you just don't know because you don't think that you've encountered it yet. That's totally fine. We'll give you all a couple of moments here to get those responses in before we turn those around and share them with the audience. Excellent. We've already got most of our answers in. Thank you for all of those that have participated. It looks like the majority of our attendees today are somewhat confident in identifying those red flags around human trafficking, which is excellent. About a quarter say that they are not very confident. Only 4% saying that they're very confident, and then 9% saying that they're not sure. Cynthia, I know this is, as you mentioned, a topic that you're very passionate about, feel very strongly about. How do you think that this stacks up to the normal distribution of other banks and credit unions, maybe folks that aren't on the call today?
Yeah, thanks. I feel like if you're somewhat confident, you are ready to be in the trenches, right? And the very confident, good for you. I think that we can do more to share with our fellow bankers and educate them. Someone who doesn't feel very confident or not sure that they would even know what they were looking at, I'm right there with you until I saw some webinars and was trained by the federal government in some of these telltale tactics. So you're not alone, and I'm so glad that you're here. Let's talk about it a little bit, right? Because I talked to Homeland Security and they informed me that there are some specific definitions that we as fraud fighters need to be aware of, right, as compliance professionals. So human trafficking, let's talk about this. And this is as is defined by the Center for Countering Human Trafficking. Human trafficking is providing or obtaining labor services of a person by force, harm, threats, coercion, scheme, plan, pattern, or you're going to benefit financially from using somebody else's work and you're not giving them any benefit, no housing, no pay, right? That type of deal. So this is forced labor, right? It's under duress. So just keep that in mind. The other piece that we hear a lot in the news, but we really don't practice in a banking environment very well, or I haven't seen it like really addressed in training. And I looked all over YouTube for training for frontline tellers, couldn't find anything, but sex trafficking, right? You have sex workers, we refer to them in the US as prostitutes, and you have sex trafficking. So a sex trafficked person is a commercial sex act that is also induced by force, fraud, coercion, right? Where the person is being induced to perform an act, or that person has not yet, they're being induced and coerced to do it, but then add to that, they're not of the age of majority, 18 years old, right? That is a huge difference between human trafficking and smuggling, and sex trafficking and sex workers. So let's talk about the flip side of it in the next slide. Trafficking is involuntary. It's a crime against a person, right? Smuggling is, I want to cross the border. I want a better life, right? Think of the folks coming, I always think of the folks coming from Mexico to US for a better life. It is a crime against the state. You pay to be transported over the border, and you are a foreign national or an illegal alien. Now, these people who are providing the service of the transportation and getting you over the border, yeah, what they're doing is illegal also, but it's not being done under duress. Okay, so that's the main difference between trafficking and smuggling. In trafficking, I don't have a choice, right? My life may be threatened if I don't go and work for you. Harsh working conditions. You know, this is what the labor unions were built on, the backs of harsh working conditions, not being paid properly, required to work long hours without breaks, right? We all now have labor laws, and in this case where you're having a harsh working condition, maybe you're underskilled, maybe you feel like you can't get a job, maybe you're being guilted to stay, right? Even though you know that might not be the best answer for you, right? But it's a harsh working condition. The difference between that and labor trafficking, right, which goes right there with trafficking, involuntary crime, it's against a person, it involves force, threats, coercion, right? They will recruit you, they will harbor you, they will provide your transportation to and from because they don't want you running away, right? And they're going to obtain forced labor. So it's a little bit different from harsh working conditions, and hopefully that helps clear that in your mind, but it's something you can always go back and look at again. Now, we mentioned sex workers. Let's talk about sex work versus sex trafficking, right?
Cynthia, before we move on, we had a quick question come in that I thought was really a great one. It said, you know, it might be easier to tell when you might be in a high probability for smuggling, as you mentioned, that's often around border areas. Is there a way to know if an institution is in a high probability for trafficking area?
Oh, that's a fantastic question, right? So I want you to think in terms of Most notably, what's coming to the U.S. In the next year is FIFA, and it's all over the U.S. There's multiple locations, right? So if you're in and around anywhere, say Miami, right, which is one of the host sites, or Houston, which is a host site, or San Francisco, which is a host site, these are areas that are all of a sudden very prone to human trafficking and these labor traffickings. What happens is there's an increased presence anytime there's an international or national event. So obviously, when these events come to town, you need vendors and you need places for people to go to the restroom, and you need places for people to sell their wares, right? Celebrating the event that's coming. So, and then you need props built, right? You might need anything from tents to temporary structures to permanent structures, right? Where are the workers coming from? Are they undocumented? Have they been smuggled in, right? That's voluntary. Or are they being trafficked in where somebody is saying, I'm going to underbid this job to the local community? So think in terms of your business dealings with the cities or the municipalities that you're banking within. They may win, these smugglers may win a contract because they underbid it, and then they're using forced work. And the way to recognize that, right, is that all the bills, for these individuals are being paid by the business. So let's talk about rent times 12 at the same address, right? So we'll get into more of that. It's addressed a little later, but yes, there is a way to tell if there's trafficking or sex working going on in your area and how to identify it. But a lot of it is around any type of event. If there's a new water park, if there's a new stadium being built, are you trying to get a new MLB team or an NFL team, right? When the Raiders left Los Angeles and went to Las Vegas, right? Prime for sex and human trafficking, Las Vegas, right? So let's talk about, hopefully that answers your question, and we'll get into more detail in just a couple of minutes. Commercial sex work is by choice or circumstance. It's that simple. If somebody made a choice to do it, it is a victimless crime. Okay, we'll just leave it at that. Sex trafficking is force, fraud, coercion, involuntary. In many cases, it will involve a minor, but there's always a victim. Nobody chose this lot in life. They didn't decide they were going to sell themselves. They are being forced to under duress, and that's the difference between a sex worker and someone who's being sex trafficked. So very similar to harsh working conditions and smuggling, right, versus human trafficking. So let's move on. And this next slide also came from the Center of Countering Human Trafficking, right? And this goes directly to what I was just alluding to. There are campaigns that run in these cities that are hosting large major sporting events, concert events, like once in a lifetime concerts. Think like Beyonce, right, where the tickets are just incredibly expensive just to be in the nosebleed section, right? That's where you're going to see an increase in the opportunity. And this is where Homeland Security and the Center for Countering Human Trafficking gets involved, and they start advertising against human trafficking. So in Super Bowl 52, that was in Arizona, they actually had 48 felony arrests, 300 misdemeanor arrests, and recovery of 5 juveniles and 1 adult victim that were being trafficked. And a lot of it was there, you'll see an uptick in education to the general public. If you've ever gone to the airport and maybe in the bathroom stall, you've seen, are you being held against your will? There are international signs of people asking for help when they're being trafficked. You can look it up on YouTube. It's a real thing, right? So if someone walks into your branch and gives you this particular sign when their captor isn't looking, it's the international, I need help, like something's wrong, I'm being trafficked sign. But then into 2024, there was a human awareness, traffic awareness effort, right, through both digital, meaning TV, internet, radio, right, and out-of-home advertisements. Think back of bathroom stalls, right, door hangers, in hotel rooms to stop this human trafficking. And then again, there's an example in Birmingham, Alabama, and then the March Madness in 2023, which we all know just concluded this last March when my beloved Houston Rockets fell to the Florida Gators. So this was not Houston Rockets, sorry, Houston Cougars fell to the Florida Gators. Quite embarrassing, as my old boss was sitting right next to me and he's a Gators fan. It killed me. Okay, moving on. Let's talk a little bit more about the Center for Countering Human Trafficking. This center is there to protect, right? So with these people, you know, they arrest the bad guys and they recover the children and the adults that have been victims. And they are ready to provide these people with a place to live, with a real job, right? It's a gotta work permit. And then if the victim follows the process, they become a legal citizen. And that also has rights and benefits to work in the US, right? It alleviates their fear of being removed from the country. It restores their ability to be self-sufficient. It makes that victim, who's also a witness, more stable, more confident to open up to law enforcement about how what happened to him happened, and it improves their ability to assist others, not only in leading the investigation, but some of these people turn into counselors and help other people who are coming out of the process of being victimized. Now, my first question would be, alleviates fear of removal, really? Because we just had a huge sting operation literally up the street from where I live, deporting undocumented immigrants that had no warrants, right? I don't know what the current administration is going to do, but as of the time that I wrote this, in the last 30 days, this was still a benefit that the Center for Countering Human Trafficking was offering, right? So maybe there's a safe haven right here that will help to alleviate the fear of removal. Let's talk about some of the other benefits, because now that you know all this, now that you understand these fraudsters are bad news and they're the bad guy, and they are, I want you to understand, it's very important that you understand the people that are targeting through direct message and phone calls and romance and elder scams and trafficking, they might be a victim too. And it's very important to understand that most folks, the ones that have the most horrendous story to tell about, you know, trying to fleece the old people out of their retirement and life savings, there's a good reason that they're so convincing and that there's such a sense of urgency with them. So let's get into that and let's talk about this one such story. It's really crazy. So this did not happen in the US. There was a gentleman by the name of Yang Weeblin, and he saw an ad for telesales, right? Entry level, but it was in Cambodia. And he was like, okay. He was 35. He was Taiwanese. He wasn't making very much money in his home country. He was a masseur, and he needed to support his parents after his dad had a stroke. That's it. You know, I need more money, and this is a great opportunity. Later, he hopped on a plane to Cambodia, and he was met by several men who drove him to a nondescript building on a deserted road, and it was not anything like the apartment or the hotel that they had promised him, right? The recruitment agent said that they put everybody up and they live in basically posh luxury. Here he is at a nondescript location. His passport was taken from him. He was told it was to sort out paperwork. He was shown to a bare room, and this was his new home. And the men said, you can't leave the compound ever. And the guy said in his interview, he says, I knew then that I'd come to the wrong place, that this was a very dangerous situation. He's among thousands of workers who have fallen prey to human trafficking. And these are jobs that are being run, this one in particular, out of Southeast Asia. And governments across Asia are sounding the alarm. It's in Indonesia, it's pervasive in Vietnam, Malaysia, Hong Kong, Taiwan. They're all being, you know, they're luring these people from out of the country, and they're promising easy work, extravagant perks. They're tricked into traveling over to Cambodia or Myanmar or Thailand. And when they get there, they're held prisoner. And they're forced to work in what's called a fraud factory. So now the criminals are looking further out, and they're preying on a different type of victim than what you would even expect. They're actually starting to go after teenagers. So watch the kids. The teenagers are coming out to be better educated. Some of them are bilingual, right? Which is super attractive to these scammers, the folks that run the scam and the fraud shops. They're also, these teenagers are more computer literate than most adults, right? They figure this stuff out. They have Chat GPT and AI and all of this, so they know what they're doing. And so now these fraud folks are targeting our teenage kids, right? One of them that was actually targeted was just 15 years old. It was a female, and she had her face disfigured by the abuse that she went through. She was told that she needed to pay off the fraudsters' debts, and that if she didn't, right, she would die basically where she was. It caused her to drop out of school, and she never went back. She never completed her education because of her disfigurement and her perceived shame, right, in her culture of having fallen for this. So what kills me is that not only are the innocents being taken advantage of, not just for money, but their very lives. On the flip side, the fraudsters aren't necessarily the ringleaders, and the ringleaders are torturing the fraudsters. It is just a really sick 360 view of what is actually happening in our world today. So I just want to leave you with that happy thought. Let's go to the next slide. I know you need therapy. I know you need some help here, right? I am here to tell you knowledge is power, and that's how we beat these bad actors. You can save a bank account. You can save a person's trust at your bank. Maybe they bank with you for as long as they're able to bank. You may even save a life. You can help. And what you can do is educate yourself and others, role play, and by all means, if you see something, say something. Don't forget that applies to fraud as well. So let's move along. Let's talk about how you get educated. Watch YouTube, government websites, scroll and troll these new news articles, and identifiers that can lead you to suspect, escalate, and even report the fraud, right? So what happens in an elder or romance scam, I think you already know. Let's talk about human trafficking. Somebody's account balance is not commensurate with their age, their business line, their employment status, right? So let's talk about it. Maybe they're very young, very wealthy, but it didn't come from family, right? Source of funds is always a concern for those of us in BSA AML. Their business line is maybe power washing or pool cleaning or gutter cleaning, but they're bringing in $60,000 a month. It doesn't commiserate with their business line. Maybe their direct deposit every week is from a local Panera Bread, right? But they're driving around in a Lamborghini. So these things are going to glare out at you like a sore thumb, right? When someone is being trafficked and they come into your institution, they are almost always escorted by somebody with them. And it's interesting because when that somebody's with them, and you may see them more than once, and the first time you might think, well, that's odd, but okay, right? The next time you see them, that same person will be with them. Take note, because chances are that person that's with them doesn't let the account holder speak. They say what they want, and they like force the account holder to nod or agree, right, to put you at ease. Look for signs of physical or emotional abuse. Again, there is an international sign that you can look for. If they have the opportunity, they will show you that sign. It's made with their hands, so be on the lookout if you suspect anything. Black eye, right? Road rash, burns, particularly cigar or cigarette size burns. And the flip side is a well manicured appearance, right? Like overly manicured, or a visible tattoo that looks like a brand, right? Some of us would call this maybe gang-like, but it may not be a gang. It may be that they're branded for life to belong to these fraudsters. So that's some of the telltale physical signs, right? The other thing that we can look at is their transactions. What are they doing? Are they asking for high amounts of cash? Are they being forced to open and close accounts, open different kinds of accounts? Are they being forced to go to multiple locations, right? So confer if you have multi branch in your environment. Next slide. When you educate yourself on sex trafficking, look in the transaction history. This is literal. I saw the bank statement of high frequency transportation. Think YouTube, think taxis, think Uber, think Lyft. I don't know why I said YouTube. Airbnb, car rentals, hotels. There's somebody who's going to a very posh day spa. A lot, like a lot. High volume of business transactions that are occurring overnight or outside of business hours, cash deposits that are made out of the state of the physical address, followed by immediate withdrawals. Nobody deposits and then makes an immediate withdrawal. Why not just keep the cash, right? And then numerous account sharing basic demographic data, such as you've got more than 10 accounts with the same phone number, email, employment references, right? Maybe even the same address. Those are pretty easy ones to look at. You may also see, and these aren't, by the way, they're examples of sex and labor trafficking and human trafficking, but any of them can be cross-referenced, right, with the other. So all of these are trafficking type red flags. And the next slide is talking about the labor trafficking, right? Business accounts that are paying rent, personal insurance, medical bills at a residential address, right? Payments to a third party, right? For employment agencies, right? We were just talking about that in that story of people going to Cambodia. They hired a recruiter to do it, right? Unrelated individual accounts, again, that list the same name or the same address. They have too many commonalities to be distinct account owners. Think of it in that term. And then educate others. And this is probably the most important slide, and we're running out of time, so I'm going to try and wrap this up. Your others are your customers. Let the fraudsters know you're educating your customers. Let the traffickers know, right? You don't want them to be a victim. So a picture is worth 1,000 words, and that's what I want you to leave with. If your institution regularly trains on AML, BSA, and red flags, you should be training on this as well. So educate yourself and then educate your staff. Bring in a professional to help you educate. And I don't know if you're aware, but if you are a smaller bank, you are a high risk target. They don't believe your training. They don't believe you know what to look out for, and they don't think you know how to report it. And they think that you're wearing 12 hats, and we all know you're wearing 12 hats, but they don't think you will notice the signs of any of this happening, right? Role play. Right? And if you're a leader, lead by example and get somebody up there, even the shyest person you know, have them role play with you about what this would look like and what you would actually say to a customer you think is being scammed. And then if your bank has an IVR that plays marketing message, you know, you could turn that into protect your data. I know we all have to put this information on our websites that say, we're never going to ask for your social. We're never going to ask you for your card number or your PIN number. We know what that is, right? But maybe you can put some education in about trafficking. If you do the same thing with a television monitor that maybe promotes your car loans and promotes home loans, right? Maybe you can throw a slide in there that's a 30-second blurb about trafficking. Here's what to look out for: elder scams, romance scam, human trafficking, sex trafficking, right? All of that good stuff. Finally, last slide, and I'm like sliding in hot here at the end of this. Here's where you report it, right? Remain vigilant. Report suspected fraud, right? Know that the people that you may attempt to encounter may be defensive, embarrassed, and ashamed. that role playing is going to be awkward with the person that you actually know in and out of work, but it's going to be even more awkward with the person you actually suspect is being frauded. So use open body language, a reassuring and understanding tone. Don't belittle, don't condescend, don't assume they are dumb because they've been taken advantage of. They are a victim and we're there to help protect them. So something to keep in mind there. And I want you to know that they have to know there's help out there and that you're ready to listen. Here are some government agencies to keep in mind. For a scam, it's the FTC. Human trafficking, there's a hotline. Fraud can go to the FTC via the ic3.gov or reportfraud.gov. And in the search engine, you can actually type, if you're interested, law enforcement speakers, and there's a number of organizations that offer both education and motivational speeches that will come visit with you and your team, depending on your situation. There may be a reduced fee or a no fee. Typically, you will pay a speaker for coming out to your location, at least their room and board, but definitely worth looking into to have a professional come and talk if you've never done this before. And with that, I just want to say thank you for hanging out there with me to the end. This has been so important and so really mesmerizing for me to look into. So I appreciate your time and your attention. And with that, Ethan, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you so much for that, Cynthia. We do have one a poll question here. We're curious. We want to know, has your institution actually worked directly with law enforcement to investigate a fraud case? I know Cynthia just dropped some of the great resources that are available to help be able to look into these, to help get that assistance. And we would like to know, are these resources that y'all are already leveraging? So please go ahead and take a moment to give us this input to let us know how you've handled this in the past. And then we'll go ahead and flip over to some Q&A. Looks like we've got some great questions that have come in. So we will definitely make sure we've got some time reserved to hopefully answer all of those for y'all live on the call. Excellent. All right, we've got some great responses coming in. We can turn this around here and show that 25%, a quarter of all of the people on the call today are regularly engaging with law enforcement to investigate a fraud case. That is excellent to hear. 38% are doing it occasionally and 25% rarely. So, I mean, that shows that the overwhelming majority of our audience has engaged with law enforcement to investigate fraud. Only 5% are never, or 8% not sure. Cynthia, is this surprising at all to you? Is this kind of what you expected? Or do you think that people are engaging maybe a little bit more than you were anticipating?
I am relieved to see that you're either regularly or occasionally dealing with law enforcement. If you're rarely or never dealing with law enforcement, it may be because you're on a different side of the business. What I would tell you, what I found super interesting, I was telling Ethan yesterday, I went to a conference for the Certified Anti-Money Laundering Specialists group, and they had Homeland Security there and law enforcement. And one of the questions from that audience was, I file SAR after SAR after SAR and they go into a black hole and I never see anything. And sometimes I do suspect people trafficking, right? Whether it's people, labor trafficking or sex trafficking, or something is being done under this person's duress, and I report it and I don't hear anything and I get really concerned. And I will let you know the importance of joining some of these professional organizations, even if you don't get your certification in them, is this. CAMS has now, the Association for Certified Anti-Money Laundering Specialists, it's known as CAMS, has now dedicated themselves to working with the Homeland Security Group. There will be a list coming out of keywords you can use in your SARs that will put that SAR at the top of the list if it meets the criteria for human trafficking. So if you just monitor that website, keep an eye out for it, I'm sure everybody's going to make themselves, avail themselves to that information. But it is something that I think is incredibly incumbent upon us as BSA, AML, and fraud experts to take this law enforcement to the next step and educate not only ourselves, but educate law enforcement as well. I'm so glad to see so many of you already are.
That's excellent. That's very well said, Cynthia. I feel the same way. It's always great to to see when our communities are coming together to help fight these bad actors. Now, that does bring us to our Q&A portion of the webinar, where you all, our audience, can come in and ask Cynthia any questions about today's topics. Now, before we do dive into these questions, and we've already got a few, thank you for those that are asking, we do have one final poll question. This is just our final way for you to maybe get in touch with RiskScout, maybe get in touch with Cynthia or DCI. You can select as many or as few of these responses as possible as you see fit. But this is just a good way to know, do you want to follow up with us to maybe see more about our solution, help fight some of these fraud and scams that are in your institution currently? Just maybe continue your education outside of this webinar. So we'll leave this up for a minute as we start to dive into our poll questions. And if you do have a question that you would like to ask, you can see that in the GoToWebinar control panel on the side of your screen. Go ahead and submit any of those questions. If we don't have the time or the ability to answer those live on today's call, we'll be sure to follow up with you after the fact so we can get you any of the responses that you're looking for there. So no worries at all. Excellent. All right, let me go ahead and dive into these. Cynthia, I know we talked a whole lot about training today, which is always super important. I know you mentioned some of those great resources. Do you have any recommended ways to maybe educate our customer or member groups to make sure that they know how to avoid these romance scams in particular?
Are you talking about the end customer, the bank's customer?
That's right. That's what this question is asking about in particular. How does my bank customer, I guess in this particular, it's a credit union's member group, how can they go about actually educating those end users to make sure that they're not succumbing to these scams?
Absolutely. So I think you have to avail yourself to any of the marketing standards that you already have in place. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel. So if you have an IVR, you can break this down into very digestible chunks, right? You can define what a romance scam is. You can define what an internet-based scam is, right? Our elders are really the most susceptible because they don't get on computers that much. It's usually, they're doing good with their smartphone, right? And believe you me, I'm not a spring chicken any longer, but there is some technology that is above my head sometimes. And I think, just letting them hear that when they're on hold, or if they come into your branch, creating a simple, not word heavy brochure, right, that you have available, or doing it on a customer screen. If you have those in your bank lobbies, are great ways to educate. You can also host seminars, right? There's nothing wrong with going out to the community and saying, we're going to talk about elder fraud in banking, and host a free webinar, maybe on a Saturday, maybe in your conference room, bring in some donuts, and maybe invite your local law enforcement. It's a great way to bring your community together, and that's just a couple of ideas.
That's well said. I'd also add in, if you don't mind, I know we've had some former BSA officers that work here at RiskScout that have also engaged their local chapters that are dedicated to fighting human trafficking. Those are folks that already probably have resources prepared, but probably already have some of those brochures or pamphlets that they would love to be able to share with you to help you distribute to your customers or members as well. So always a good advice from Cynthia there to make sure you're leveraging all of the different avenues that you have at your disposal. Now, we did have another question that came in that said, sometimes I've suspected trafficking in the past, but I'm not sure if I should just file a SAR or if I should contact the police immediately. Do you have any advice?
Yeah, I go with my gut intuition. If I really feel that something's wrong, like wrong, I'll do both. I'll file the SAR hoping somebody sees it, but I know I'll never know the outcome. And if I feel strongly about it, it's something that you're remembering to this day, and it's occurred sometime in the past. Yeah, I would definitely engage law enforcement. I would rather call law enforcement 100 times for only 50 of those to be valid than not call on the one that could have changed somebody's life.
Absolutely. Well said. Well said. We had another question asking if there are forums or a different way for bankers to be able to connect with other bankers to help identify some of these bad actors in their communities. They mentioned that they don't always feel like they have all of the information needed in order to pursue a case or file a SAR. from their own institution, but they suspect that maybe neighboring ones do. Cynthia, do you have any advice or experience in this realm?
I do, and I'm super excited to tell you that your banks, your fellow banks in your community really do want to talk to you. And even broader than that, they want help as well. There are places that you can go for additional resources if you want to bounce ideas off, or if you have data you want to have run. There's a couple different nonprofits. One is the Financial Fraud Consortium, which is a nonprofit that is dedicated to banks, processors, program managers, third-party vendors, right? That all come together. They talk about their fraud scenario in an anonymized fashion, meaning that we're not sharing PII. We're saying, here's the problem with this debit card or this prepaid card, or we stopped a ring of phone scammers and this is how it happened. We had one just recently with a mobile app where people were being fleeced out of their money through what looked like a very good replica of the bank's app. So we educate on that. So there's that one. And then there's another one that's called Sonar or Sardine AI that you can look up. That's another nonprofit, and it's more data heavy. But if you just Google consortium, right? Fraud consortium, there's a number of places that you can start. Now, if you want to start with the banks in your hometown, I honestly still believe in the baking of the cookies and walking them to the bank and asking to speak with the branch manager and say, hey, I've got this problem, or do you know anything, have experience with, right? If you want to start small and within your community, it's all in how you want to do it, but there are resources.
That's excellent. That's excellent. I'm sure that no banker here in their right mind would turn down some fresh cookies. I think that's a great advice. Excellent. Well, I think that does get through most of the questions that we had today. We do want to say, before we close out, we want to invite everyone here on the call to take the BS out of BSA by requesting a demo of our BSA solution. Our team of former regulators, BSA officers, and fintech professionals, we built this solution to provide an effective alternative to solutions on the market today that might be a little antiquated or outdated. And we're excited to show you how we can help you optimize your AML program. We're also excited to offer you a Taking the BS Out of BSA t-shirt to anybody that schedules a demo and follows up with our team. So be sure to go ahead and sign up to see our solutions. We'd love to get you into some awesome swag here. And that is all of the time that we have for today. Thank you so much for everyone joining us, and particularly thank you to Cynthia for sharing not only her time, but all of her expertise with us. Be sure to keep an eye on your inbox. We'll be sending out the recording from today, the slides, the resources. All of those will be in your inbox tomorrow morning. We had a couple questions come in asking, can we share those? The answer is yes. We would love to get this information, knowing how helpful it can be to not only helping other bankers, but helping the victims of these heinous crimes. We would love for you to spread these with any bankers that you think would benefit. So please don't hesitate to do that. There will be a brief survey following today's webinar where you can give Cynthia some feedback on how she did, on any topics that you might want to see for future webinars, or you can reach out to RiskScout directly. So please take a moment and share your thoughts. We greatly appreciate it. Of course, if you have any additional questions, if you want to learn more about RiskScout or DCI, if you want to just come say hi, you can always visit us at riskscout.com. We hope to see you on our next webinar. And again, Cynthia, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.